says. Oh, you can pass that if you want. You ready, Pat?
I am.
Call this meeting to order. We'll begin our 2 p.m. budget review discussion for FY21. Dennis is going to introduce the running total first.
Okay, we started at a tax rate proposed at $7.29 for countywide and $9.83 for rural unincorporated areas. The rural includes the countywide plus rural basic. So on the countywide, we're up 6 cents over the current year, and on rural, we're up 10 cents. After 2 weeks of cutting, reviewing budgets, getting additional revenues, we are now down to the page 4. We're down to $7.23, which is a 6 cent reduction, and we're at 0 tax rate. Now, that's a little misleading because I carry these 2 places, and the tax rates you have to carry in 5 places, so I'll get to that in a second. On the rural, we're up 4 cents also at the present, all because basically of the secondary road minimum levy 50,000 increase. Okay, if you go to the next page after the 4 red and green pages, you have a page that looks like this. This shows you what we've done each week by department. And it comes down so far, we've got $259,181 through expenditure cuts and additional revenues. So you go to the last page, it shows you what we started rate for our current rates, what we started proposed rates, and where we're currently at after the cuts and additional revenues. So overall, countywide, we're still 36,000 short, or we need to cut or come up with revenues to get a 0 tax rate increase when we go out 5 digits. Also, we need to cut 49,094 out of rural basic if we want to get to the same tax rate. We will have some changes today that will affect these, but I'll keep a running total so at the end of the meeting we know where we're at. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item A from the Board of Supervisors includes 1, County Services, Regional Distribution. On page 42, the Board of Supervisors.
Okay, on this one, on page 42, the supervisors, what we put under the supervisors, our allocation, which is our per capita. Our per capita this year is going to be $37.66. Everybody otherwise is $36, but we still have $170,000 some odd dollars to make up to fulfill our agreement with Rolling Hills on our transfer balances over to them. So after this year, that 170 is eliminated, we're where we want to be, and then Dawn can explain why we're at $36. Could be so kind. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Our governance board met on January 8th for budget discussion. We had a two-hour work session and then the board meeting to follow. I had recommended to the governance board a per capita target expenditure amount of $38.68. Currently, all of the counties, all 7 counties without Woodbury are at $30.75. Woodbury County's contribution this year is $33.63. So I recommended an increase to cover the budget expenditure that was set at $7,631,840. This was debated at length, and at the end of the discussion that we had to institute a weighted vote for the first time in the history of the region. So the $36 per capita was what was approved through the weighted vote process, and the $38.68 did not prevail. So at the $36 per capita, it underfunded next year's regional budget by approximately $540,000. So that we will be utilizing more reserves through the region to be able to make up that deficit next year. With that, I'm also anticipating revenues next year over and above the per capita contributions. We're starting to get some reimbursements on our crisis home in Sac City, as well as the assessment center here in Sioux City has been kind of slow in receiving those revenues, but we're also getting some additional revenues from our hospitals that we have telepsych, and so the hospitals are contributing towards that. So anticipated revenues are increased to $470,395, and it would result in a projected ending balance for Rolling Hills of $2,490,178, or 33%. If you can recall, a few years back, Senate File 504 limited our fund balance requirements to 20 or 25% based on population size of the region. and then last year, the legislature increased that amount to 40%. So we're going to be below the threshold of 40%, hoping that we don't have any major changes to our budget expenditures that we would result in that 33% or right around there. So with your contribution at the $36, there's also a deficit that you're not able to fulfill as part of the memorandum of understanding that was signed between Rolling Hills and Woodbury County approximately almost 2 years ago now, that required that $1 million contribution towards the reserve balance for Rolling Hills. You were able to provide, let's see. This year, you will be contributing $829,605 towards that $1 million balance, so there's just going to be a deficit of $170,395 that will need to be made up next year. So your per capita will still be at a higher level, and we're going to have to address that in our 2080 agreement, because the way we revised it for this year to allow Woodbury County to come in with a higher per capita, we're going to have to adjust that again before the start of the fiscal year to allow that to happen for year 2 as well. So your expenditures for FY21 are a total of $4,196,346. That is your per capita, in addition to the expenditure for salaries and benefits for staff. What you have on the expenditure line for staff is also your revenue, which is the next line of $334,547. I don't know if you're referring to, this is what I'm reading off of, okay, what I sent you for your packets. Your revenue of the $334,547, it's going to be contributed, but it comes back to you from the region, just as this fiscal year did at the beginning. And so I'm recommending that you levy $3,861,799 to continue to strive towards that zero ending balance in your mental health fund. Now, I'll leave it up to Mr. Gill, because he will need to determine whether he's comfortable with getting the mental health fund down that low. It's really a challenge to be able to get out into that zero balance effort, because the region has the spending authority, but if I have 8 counties all holding 5% in a balance, then it's going to throw the region and the counties in an aggregate above that 40% threshold. So that's where we're striving to get the counties down to that zero balance. Any questions on those expenditures or the budget going forward?
The 40% ending balance legislation, a little bit of a rabbit trail, I apologize, but do you think that was due to other regions just not complying?
I think the reason is because they realized that that was so low for the counties and the regions on an aggregate to get to that 20 or 25%. With Woodbury County, we were above that threshold, and so we had to be at 20%. Well, we would not have had the amount of money needed to pay our first quarter expenses and our fund balance. So I think the legislature realized that it's going to have a very significant impact on the regions, and so they did go back and increase that to 40%, which is a little more comfortable for me. This budget does not assume any of the costs for the children's behavioral health services. I made that very clear to the governance board that day, that this was the floor, and that the 3868 only encompassed what we had budgeted. It did not include the children's behavioral health services that we've been working towards a plan that's due to the state on April 1st. It also does not include a large amount for the additional core services that we have to have in place by July of 2021 to be in compliance with the law. Out of the 8 core services we have to have within our region next year, we have 3 of them. And so I've got about $950,000 budgeted for core service development, but when I put a price estimate on what it's going to take for us to develop the additional services that we don't have, we were looking at an estimated $6 million in additional costs to the region, and we can't levy that amount. We can only, if we would have even gone to our max per capita, the 4279, that only, from the 3868, that only generates another 1.3 million. So we had a really lengthy discussion about, is it really even necessary to levy to the max to be able to reserve those funds for future expenditures when you can't even meet the needs of your region and, as a whole. So
This weighted vote, what reasons did the other counties on Woodbury County's side, so to speak, give for their support of that? Was it related to just Woodbury
tax.
County, or did it affect them?
No, it would affect everybody because being at the lower per capita rate to go to 3868 is about a $9 tax increase. And they wanted to step it up on a more gradual basis. Instead of going to that 3868, they compromised at the 36, knowing that we still have a projected 33% any fund balance, barring any catastrophic claims that the region would receive that are unanticipated because we're dealing with people's lives. And then also, I think it was just that they wanted that more gradual shift up. But, you know, keep in mind, next year, we're probably going to be upwards of the 4279 to be able to meet our budgetary needs. So, unless, if you've been reading about the proposal that the governor has out there on the buyout of the property tax levies on the regional basis, and she's looking at a $12.50 max per capita across all of the counties within the state of Iowa, and a backfill of state dollars in sales tax revenue of $80.6 million next year. I don't know the status of that currently, but that has been one of the things that she brought up in her State of the State address. And so I think that, you know, that obviously there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be supporting that, but there's going to be a lot on the opposite side as well. So we'll just have to watch it and see what happens. Other questions?
Dennis?
In this particular case, county service, mental health, and debt service are not included in our tax limitations. So basically, because these are out of our control. And this year, because it's so high, we did three things. We used cash reserves for the current year to reduce it, using the carryovers from Sioux Rivers, and we had about 250 increase in the budget, and we had to make up the 170. So next year, our increase will be less than this, but still going to be something in fiscal year 21-22 to go from 36 up. In our case, it'll be 37.66. Our increase won't be as large as the other counties, but it'll go maybe to 42 possibly. And that won't even meet enough money to do what she's got to do.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Dennis, because that's one thing I failed to mention is that Woodbury County, we had anticipated, I mean, it was really a moving target trying to determine what the ending balance was going to be coming out of Sioux Rivers. And at the end of the year, it ended up, there was a shortfall that we were anticipating about 1.45 million coming out of Sioux Rivers, and it ended up being closer to 1.3, so therein lies the deficit. So fortunately, it needs to be made up this next year.
Okay.
All right.
Anything else?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll move to receive. Second by, who was that? DeWitt. Hearing no other discussion.
Aye.
All in favor, say aye.
Weird having his voice from down there.
I know. Nothing gets past you, Dennis.
He's quick.
All opposed, say nay. Passes 4-0. Item 2, Building Services, page 27. Tri-View.
Okay, in this case, I believe, Don, you can back up again, please. Let us know that we have to cover our administrative costs and utilities
Oh, sure.
on a local level.
Okay, so for this fiscal year, I did not make any changes to the expenditures at the Tri-View building. Because Woodbury County is covering 100% of your costs, I just left that untouched. So Rolling Hills has been paying for all the admin costs out of the Tri-View building, and that's unique only to Woodbury County. We have moved all of the office building expenses that well, not so much like paper or anything like that. The region still pays those expenses, but for utilities, sanitation, disposal, water, sewer, those are all covered within the other counties under building services. So it does state in the coordinator contracts with all of the regions, or the counties within the region, excuse me, that there will be, each county will provide office space, supplies, et cetera, for the coordinator to perform their duties. So at that point, when I had just Woodbury County under having those expenses under the regional budget, I am requesting that next year they streamline with the rest of the counties and move to those costs out of the admin costs for the region into the building services area.
She is estimating those costs by $16,000, so we are going to put them, board approves it, we'll put the 16,000 in the Tri-View, which is on page 27. But another caveat to this a little bit is the Siouxland Mental Health has agreed to refund or reimburse us 50% of the cost. So 16,000 will be an addition, but there'll be 8,000 offset, so we only have 8,000 to add to the budget.
Right.
Questions? I'll move to receive.
Second.
Second by Radig. Hearing no discussion.
Okay.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Thank you. Item 3 is the Communications Center on page 3 of which tab, Dennis?
This would be under Supervisors.
Okay.
In this case here, basically it's the next one on agenda number 4. That on this, I did check with the city. They are not going to make any decisions, but they aren't going any higher than what we have in the budget. It could potentially be a little less, but they aren't going to act on theirs until February 18th. For us, that's too late because they have different publication guidelines than we do, where we got 10 and 20 days. But we also had that extra hearing too in March. So what I'm suggesting is we leave the number we have in there now. It might be high. If it isn't, but it won't be any more. So by the time we get to our hearing, there's potential. It might be less, which we can reduce at the hearing.
If it doesn't meet our deadline, then could they actually reduce it and it would be reduced on our end as well?
Yes, yes. We'll be publishing at the level it's at right now.
Okay.
Yes.
For the first publishing deadline.
Yep, because it's in our general basic fund, the allocation. Okay, anything want to say or anything? Okay. I had them here just in case there's questions. So I guess it's just
Any
receive the number.
questions for just in case Glenn?
Because I'm not a communications expert, he is.
I don't have any questions unless you do.
So no changes from what we looked at before.
No, and actually it's less than the current year, I believe.
Yeah, we actually had some new revenue off of our North High Tower, which helped offset some of the operating budget, and the health insurance had a major cut within it as part of the line item. So would offset the increase.
I'll move to receive it.
Second the motion by Radig. Hearing no discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn.
Item 4 from WCICC, page 17.
Of the supervisor's packet. On this case too, I did check with Donna Forker over the city finance department. They will not review this until February 18th. So again, we're putting the amount we have currently, which is probably high. Hopefully it'll go down, which we can adjust in our public hearings. And this does include the Taylor cost. I think there's still a few HTE agreements still to pay on.
Tyler.
Tyler. HT, yeah. Well, we got HT plus Tyler. We got two we're paying maintenance on now. They were still on some HT product, and we're mainly on Tyler now. But their stuff is in there. Your agreements, yes.
Correct, yes.
So eventually that might go down once we get rid of some more HT, but we still have, I think, our law enforcement's on HT.
Yes.
So, and they're talking about a change too, which you'll see in the CIP coming up. So, there you go.
Dennis said it so eloquently, I don't know if I can repeat that, so.
What percentage does the county pay overall?
44.4.
You anticipate any changes?
I'm not anticipating any changes. So, as far as going down or up or,
Right.
yeah, I suspect it would go down rather than up of what the number you have in front of you.
Okay.
So if Tyler is 11th or 1.1 million of it, what's the other, or what is that?
I think that's a misprint. I think Tyler's only like I don't know what the one.
Is it like 200,000 or?
I want to say it's 155 or 175.
That's farther on
It's
the
a number
page.
like that, yeah.
That's on the right side of the page. It's just a formatting thing, I think.
It's 155,000.
Yeah.
Oh, that's regular operations, $1,190,000. Tyler's 155,000.
That sounds better.
Yes. Much better.
Because it looks like in the breakdown of software services, it looks like 1.19 million Tyler software expenses.
Again, there'll be flaws this first year, but it does really relate back to regular operations. The
Okay.
190 and software is 155.
I get it there.
Any other questions?
Move to receive.
I'll second the motion by DeWitt. Hearing no discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 4-0. Thank you.
I'll tell Bob to be real hard on you.
What's that?
Just kidding.
Item 5, conservatorships. Page 24.
Under the board. Yep. This is new legislation where we got to provide guardianship or conservatorships, whatever they want to call it. I did plug in 50,000. The board can go lower, they can go higher, but we have no idea where to go. And talking to Chief Judge Hoffenmeyer, he said he has no clue where it's really going to go. You know, it could be as high as 100,000, or it could be 10,000. So we cut the median down to 50,000. So in our tax askings, that does include the 50,000 already.
It does.
Yes, it does. Yep. So, you know, the only option you want to do is if you want to change the number. If you go up, it's more taxes. You go to less, it's less.
And we're just guessing either way.
It's a guess either way, because it's brand new, nobody knows, including the judge.
I'll move to receive. Second by DeWitt. Hearing no discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 4-0. Item 6, Woodbury County landfill, page 47. The increase you mentioned earlier, Dennis, is that in these numbers?
Okay, the increase that we originally proposed were under current contract that we had a landfill meeting last week, and the current contract, we're at 2% increase. Gil Hauling did come back and request to amend the contract from 2 to 3%, plus do away with the $60,000 rent they pay per year. And they gave numerous reasons. The methane gas, that's cost a lot more than they ever thought it cost, because methane gas is causing a little bit of a problem. Also, federal regulations are causing a major problem. That's going to happen to every landfill in the state of Iowa. So with that said, the board agreed to go to the 3% and forgive the $60,000 each year for the next 3 years. So what we need to do is we increase ours from the 2% I had to 3%, which amounts to $2,105 more. And then our per capita for the rural people, because we can only levy on the rural townships, is $3.08 per capita, which that would amount to $25,258. So between the two of them, those would be add-ons to what we currently are at, adding 1% plus the per capita. The board did vote 10-0, or well, 10, 5 didn't vote out of the 15, and our 10 include out of the 10, one of ours was our 2 board members voting for it.
One of ours was our 2 board members?
No, one vote of those 10 is our
Okay.
2 board members. I'm sorry. And the other 9 were various towns. And some of the biggest towns did approve it, Sergeant Bluff, Mobile. They're the biggest contributors, and the others, you know, fall off by their population. So this is something that the landfill commission goes back and tells the board how much they need. We don't have any choice on the board except to levy it.
Anyone on the commission want to comment on that meeting?
Go ahead, Marty, you're smiling.
It was interesting. I mean,
It was very informative.
yeah, there are numerous obstacles right now, and there's no doubt when you put the recycling in, that's costing. You have to pay a place in Lamarche to take the recycling. And we've all been led to believe you make money on recycling.
Yeah, the numbers are scary. Some places are charging as much as $80 a ton. And other larger municipalities are charging way more than that, so.
And the plastic recyclables, where they used to take them, are coming back. And they don't know really what to do with them.
Coming back?
To the
They
landfill.
haul them back to the landfill.
So they got to dispose of them somehow. I think there used to be boatloads of this recycling going to China. Well, they stopped that now too. So it's not going there anymore. So I don't know what they're doing with those boatloads, but it's quite a detailed thing. There's a lot to comprehend in one meeting. But we had to do a vote by texting, basically email. So they had to vote because we didn't get everybody there to have a quorum to pass the actual motion. We made motions, sent them out by email, and I think Marty Research is legal to do that, and then we had the cities vote by noon today for the actual action. Like I say, it was 10 to 0 to 5 didn't vote, which is a super majority. Okay, we're going to be talking about super majorities a lot in the next few weeks.
Anyway,
So the total would be $27,363 additional to what we have, which would be on rural basic.
so moved. Second by DeWitt. Hearing no other discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those say nay. Passes 4-0. B, improvement requests. We have the first from Conservation.
And that is back under your CIP, or your improvement request at the back of your budget book. The total number for improvement requests from conservation is $230,015. Involves I believe it's three people.
This one happens later.
That's CIP. Yeah, we're doing improvement.
Well, these are not new positions to you that you've seen. These are positions that, when my board does their long-range planning and looking at their needs and what they need to do our job, these are three positions that keep coming up. I gave you a little more background on the naturalist position this year, on the number of programs we turned down. I think it was 27 programs this past year, and they kept track of how many people would have been in those programs, and that was another 3,000 people that we wouldn't touch with our program. And the other ones are pretty descriptive as well.
And all three of these are from last year as well.
Yes, and I think you've seen those a couple years before that. My predecessor also had them in. These have been high on our list of our long-range planning meetings that we have. It comes up with staffing every year.
Well, you might as well go over them again.
Yeah. Well, first one, I'll have it right on top. By no particular order, is our full-time resource technician, and that's down at Southwood area. The county is broke up into three districts, basically. You've got Little Sioux, Browns Lake, Snyder Bend, and then the Southwood Recreation Area. Snyder Bend, Browns Lake, and Little Sioux each have a district manager, an assistant resource manager, and a technician. So they've got three full-time employees to do their work down there. And at Southwood, we only have a district resource manager and an assistant resource manager. We don't have that technician. But Southwood is the one that does most of our habitat work. They plant thousands of acres of prairie. They do our food plots, and I think they're 400 or 500 acres a year. So they're pretty heavily involved in our management of our areas down there. The Owego complex down there, the wetland complex that we manage, is under their wing as well. So that's a lot of work, and we're trying to do it with two full-time employees, and we try to get seasonal people when we can in there. So that is needed for Southwood. Next one would be our full-time interpretive naturalist position out at the Nature Center. Currently, we have two naturalists. We've got Dawn Schneider, which is our EE director, and then Teresa Crude, who is our naturalist. As you know, Dawn Schneider does more administrative work and fundraising and doing grants, so she isn't out in the field as much anymore because she helps pull in the dollars to help us supplement our program. We run 5 or 6 interns a summer, and we do that with revenues that we generate, and we still turn people away. So the kids in the school programs, if you've been out there, you can see how popular they are. But we had 114 programs this past year, public programs with over 7,100 participants. We reached over 4,706 students and had over 1,500 students visit the Nature Center on their self-guided visits. Like I told you, we turned away 27 potential programs and that would have reached another 3,000 people. And then, of course, we have 50,000 people come through our doors every year out at the Nature Center. So this is an important, as you know, the Nature Center is our flagship. It's our public, it's what shows you, not alone Woodbury County Conservation Board, but Woodbury County. If you saw the ad that they ran during the Super Bowl, the Nature Center was one of the sites that they picked and put on there when it flies. It's there. You see, you have to look quick, but you can see the sign. But it's kind of nice. But we do help with quality of life, and I know that's what businesses look at when they come into town to relocate. Is one of the top. I think it's in the top 5. Is what are their employees going to do on the off time with their families? So we try to provide that. So that's a very important position to us. And then the third one is a GIS Natural Resource Coordinator. And I know Rick has talked to you about this before. With all the parks that we manage, all the wildlife areas that we manage, GIS is a very important tool that we can do more planning, from the simple burn plans we do to the habitat plannings of native prairie, and have those in layers and to be able to manage that, and then have that person actually be able to go out and be in the field and work on that, and be able to go out and inventory and make sure the work's getting done in these sensitive areas. And so that GIS natural resource person is very important to us. Right now we have 3 Conservation Corps crews come in that we use revenues to pay for, and the foundation pays for one of those crews, and we manage those on our areas to try and get ahead and take care of those problems, from noxious weeds to invasive species to putting in fence lines. And so this position would be very beneficial to us too. So if I have any questions, I'd be willing to try and answer them for you.
Can you pitch any of these positions in a way that either brings revenue? Because I know a lot of this is, obviously, they're nice things the county does.
Yes.
That either brings in revenue or reduces liability in some area.
Both. The liability would be taking care of dead trees that are overhanging that should be taken down, that could have, as you call, a widowmaker hanging up there that could create a problem on county property, in the parks and wildlife areas. Fencing, burn plans, if we're not doing those correctly or going out and managing those areas. If we have prairie that's overgrown, or it's overgrown with woody, and we have fire and we can't control it because we haven't burned it and gotten rid of some of that understory, liability there. For your economic side of it, some of that's hard to see on paper. You know, we have all the economic studies that show that each acre of wildlife habitat we have is worth $400 an acre to the local revenue when you have hunters come in. So they talk, if you have 5,000 acres, it's worth $400 an acre in economic revenue, because they come into town, they go to the sporting goods stores, they buy gas, they stay in motels, they eat food. So that's a hard one to put your fingers around when I talk. I can't show it to you on paper as well in our budget, but we do bring revenue other than the camping and the cabins. They do rent our cabins. They do camp. We have hunters that try and run through our cabins as long as they can during the winter when they duck hunt. In fact, we actually had some that wanted to try and stay in them for 2 months straight and hunt the river, but then the river didn't cooperate, so that fell through. So those are types of revenues that we would generate.
Dennis?
The revenues he's talking about, I think, do go to Conservation Reserve Fund, so it would not help, fund these
Positions as
taxes.
much. Because all
These
that.
positions wouldn't be affected by additional revenues, because it goes into Conservation Reserve. Am I
Because,
right?
yeah, the money that we get right now, your resolution is that all the revenues that we produce through the camping and the cabins goes into our CIP fund, and that's how we pay for all of our projects that we do. We don't use tax dollars. But we do generate revenue, but unfortunately it goes to offset. So we don't come and ask for more CIP dollars.
You said that volunteers can't shoulder the burden of the resource tech position. obviously probably not the GIS specialist either. If you had more volunteer involvement, would it alleviate some of the pressure on the two naturalists?
We've got everybody we can get out there for volunteers. They've got a heck of a volunteer, and Betty, our volunteer coordinator, does a heck of a job. And we're maxed out on people to handle those people coming in and to be able to work with them, go into the schools, do the school programs. So we have to say no. We've worked with AmeriCorps. We've actually got Olivia that's on staff right now for a year, and that's all through AmeriCorps funding, and has helped. But those are grant dollars that dry up, and she can only work for a year, and then she's gone. Mm-hmm. So we've been looking for those other avenues, Matthew, to get those volunteers and get those interns and get all that money from AmeriCorps and the foundation. They actually they again fund another intern for us during the summer that helps with the naturalist resource tech out at the Nature Center. So,
Which of these do you think would be easiest to hire if you posted it?
easiest to hire?
Someone's calling you.
I'm saying that. That's time to go. I would say the naturalist and the resource tech would be the two easiest. The GIS coordinator would be a little harder unless we had somebody on staff. And we do have somebody on staff that does our GIS part-time if they wanted to switch over, but then I'd have to fulfill that position. So you're backfilling.
Can you explain on the resource tech, you say with 3 full-time positions, this would allow the district manager to be an exempt employee year-round?
Yeah, when they're exempt, they don't get overtime, they don't get comp time. They'll be managing 2 people. Mm-hmm. So then they're exempt. They're not going to be gaining overtime. They're going to work. They have to work 50 hours, 60 hours to get the job done.
What sort of overtime does that position accrue now?
That I would have to get those numbers for you, Matthew.
Is it minimal, substantial?
Oh, right now, well, for one thing, my predecessor did an excellent job of only allowing 10 to 15 hours maximum of comp time to be built, and I've held that in check. So,
Okay. So nothing greater than we're used to?
no, we don't allow them to get a lot of, and then they've got to use it by April. We want it cleared off the books before we go into the next season. So basically, we're dealing with vacation, but when you're limiting somebody to overtime, and that's the only people you have, you've got to shut your work down, and there's certain work that's not getting done. That extra person will allow us to get more work done. And there again, they would be under the same issue of you can only get 10 to 15 hours of comp time on the books. So
Which one of these have you had as a request for the longest period of time?
I'm being only here 2 years, and these were already in the books, and they were always talked about. I can't answer that. I'd be guessing. I wouldn't give a
Okay.
truthful answer.
Dennis, all 3 of these would come out of the countywide,
General basic,
so the countywide levy.
yes, yes.
And you estimated it was it $39,000 per cent of the levy?
The levy,
Somewhere around-
about 1 cent comes about 48,000.
48,000, okay. Well, I've voiced several questions. Anyone else on the board want to chip in?
Yeah, I have one. When you said that on the resource technician be an exempt employee year-round,
The resource tech wouldn't be exempt.
No, but I mean the
manager would be exempt year-round.
is he exempt part of the year now when you have other people?
Yes, what happens is, and that position right now is Don Har.
Right.
So for 6 months out of the year, he's exempt. But then we have to switch him, I think it's April, because when you bring on your two seasonal or a seasonal person, then you've got your two people that you supervise.
Supervisors, yeah.
Then he meets the other two criteria of salary and responsibility. So we switch back and forth from exempt to a non-exempt.
So he's hourly for 6 months and exempt for the other 6.
Yes. It's a real nightmare to.
I'll bet.
Because if you forget to tell him to switch, then you have to work with HR and payroll. So, well, we were supposed to get him to switch last month, but it's our problem.
I'm probably not going to support any of the positions myself. And I know you're asking, you're doing your job, and that's what you can do. You know, I'm just looking at where we're at and where we're trying to be with other projects like the jail project, and I'm just not of a position that it's necessarily time to add staff. So that's just letting you know where I'll be. And I get why you're asking.
I know it's tough, but I know these have been on the books quite a while, and they keep, and just like pick one off here and there and try and.
I get it.
If I was going to support one, I'd probably go for the Naturalist personally, but a little bit where Mr. Raddick is on that is, we get why you're asking. It's just one of those things that.
And I would think that the Naturalist would probably been the one that's been, and Rick may be different, who maybe he's watching, who knows, but maybe it is. I would say that's an important position for us because we meet so many people and the outreach we have.
And I'd have to agree, that'd be the one I would support the most, simply because of how many programs we turn away.
Yeah, and they do, and when you listen to Teresa talking to the teachers that she has to turn away, and how disappointed they are, and it's that they can't bring those classrooms out, or we can't go because we're already booked up, and that's the hardest thing.
Well, with the resource tech, you have the new cabins that you mentioned.
What's that?
What's that?
Do we need to make a violence in the workplace?
Yeah. I was making sure he was awake. I thought he was nodding off.
Oh, no, I'm awake.
He was winking at Rocky or something. I don't know. What was that, Matthew, about the cabins?
You mentioned there's 2 new cabins.
Yeah, they added 2 new cabins down at Southwood, and those have taken off. And we're actually looking at, we'd love to put a couple more in down there. We have room for those. We opened those up last year to be an open year-round. We've been trying to get that word out to the people, and have been advertised on the websites and people when they're checking into the cabin stuff. So hopefully we can get more use throughout the year and get more revenues in on those cabins during the winter. When you think of that, those we left open in the past, they were not used. So.
Conservation Board liaison want to chime in?
I already did. I would,
Just that one?
because I'm big on doing the programs. I think, they're all good positions.
Well, they are, and the biggest bang for your buck is going to be your Naturalist program right now. We need that resource tech out in the field. We do. But if I had to choose, I'm with you guys.
Because I just hate the fact that that's what we're there for, and we're turning people away because that's all we can handle. And again, it is a quality of life thing, it doesn't have an income side, so I understand it, but that's the one I would support.
I appreciate your support on that. And I understand what you guys are going through, but let's keep my fingers crossed. Dennis keeps smiling. I don't like that.
No, they're needed.
Work your magic, Dennis. Find that money. Anything else?
We're going through quite a lot. Well, don't envy my role in the sequence of the votes for this one, since there's three separate. Let's start with a motion to deny all requests and see where that goes.
Well, I'll make that.
Well, I made it.
Okay, then I'll second that.
Second by Radig. Roll call.
I see that.
Okay. DeWitt?
Nay.
Potabom?
No.
Reddick?
Aye.
Ung?
Aye. Motion fails 2-2. Unlike at the Supreme Court, that doesn't mean that you get everything you ask for. It just means that.
Can I guess a tiebreaker?
Is there a motion for? Is there agreement on supporting one of the positions? I've heard the Naturalist. Radig, if you had to pick, even if you voted no, would you pick one of the three?
At this point, I would not pick any. So
Okay.
that's.
Have a heart, come on.
What?
I would move to take on the naturalist position.
Second.
Any discussion on this one?
As for sake of discussion, it might be hard to pass a budget if we're not all in agreement on where we're going to be at the tax asking by the end of it. That's where I'll have to leave it because
Understood.
we only have 4 members.
You want to chime in, Dennis, on a thing you wanted to address earlier
Is that on the vote?
about supermajorities?
Yes, super majorities. In talking with Joshua, even though we have a vacancy on the board, it still takes a super majority of at least 4. It used to be 3, but now it's 4, because 3 was 60%, super majority is 66%. So now it takes all 4 of the remaining board members to pass a budget, because the vacancy will not be filled way after our budget hearings.
That's on the overall budget.
That's on the
Yes,
old
on the overall.
Oh.
I think that's what Keith's referring to.
That's,
So,
So we're not going to pass a budget.
it might.
Keith's going to sharpen his pencil.
but that's the reality we're facing. Before it was a 4-1 vote to qualify. Now it's a 4-4 vote. 4 out of 4 has to pass it.
Any other discussion?
I mean, you can always pass it, but we might get back to the day to approve the budget and have to come back and take it out. That's what I'm saying. That's, because if we're going to shoot for no impact on the levy by the time it's time to approve the budget, I think that's going to hurt this case, because this is maybe, what, 2-3 cents alone, or what is it?
71,000 about
Maybe 5 cents.
Not
4
quite
cents.
2.
4 cents about up, unless we find other ways to compensate.
Offset, sure.
So the motion is to approve the naturalist position.
Correct.
Roll call again.
DeWitt?
Aye.
Potabom?
Aye.
Reddick?
No.
Ung?
Nay. And this fails 2-2, Radig and unopposed. So there will be no action on this. I will say, echoing Radig's comments, the effect would be the same as if we were to add this later on as it would be if we were to approve it now and have to take it out later because we find that we can't support it. So I and Dennis will bookmark the naturalist alone as a position to attempt to fill in this process.
And if you need anything from me, or if I can work with you in any way, more than willing. I
Okay?
appreciate what you're trying to do. I really do. Thank you.
Thanks.
Next up, improvement requests on emergency services. Dennis, is this the only one left that we have?
Yes, we only had two.
Okay.
District health had some, but they're really into district health budget and won't impact if they do
That's what
approve
I was
their
asking.
people, it won't affect our allocation. Our allocation is set.
Good afternoon, Gary Brown, Woodbury County Emergency Services. Been a little bit of a raspy voice today, so when we went to the paramedic program, we'd asked for 2 quarter-time paramedics. We came back last year and tried to fill that other quarter-time paramedic position, and it was denied. What we're asking for this year, rather than a quarter-time position, we're asking to add 150 hours to the current part-time position that we have. As these guys get more time on the job, they're earning more time off. They're earning more sick leave that they can take. It's just a matter of trying to plug holes in the schedule and keep a paramedic on 24/7. The actual impact budget-wise with IPERS and FICA, Social Security is $5,020.06 to add 150 hours to that 520-hour part-time position, rather than to ask for the full quarter-time position. Questions?
Been my experience that everybody uses their vacation, but does everybody use their maximum sick leave?
No, but if somebody needs to, then, but even with, if we go from 520 to 670 hours, that plugs the hole for vacations and the comp time that they're able to earn within the course of a 20 or 12-month schedule. So it's really not allocating a lot out there for the use of their sick time. It's basically taking care of their vacation and the comp time they earn as just a part of the regular schedule, because we give them comp time rather than overtime.
So it would be fair to ask too that the more vacation and or sick leave that these guys build up, these people build up, that you'll be asking for extra hours on down the road to where it basically won't be a quarter-time position anymore, or?
Well, I think we will have to increase it honestly over time in order to stay at that 95% of the call coverage that we're targeting, to have a paramedic available on 95% of the time to cover 95% of the calls. We look at these statistics, we've got them computerized, and there's not a good time in the schedule to take and not have that paramedic on. I mean, we get the cardiac patients in the middle of the night, we get them in the middle of the day. And we're just hitting 100% on what we call STEMI, the widowmaker heart attacks. If you come out the office, you'll see we actually started a wall of those. The cardiologists really are on top of what we're doing, and they appreciate it. And we're the only resource available out there now without Sioux Lime paramedics, Sioux City Fires at their staffing level to cover the city of Sioux City. We do get, Sergeant Bluff has some paramedics, but we're still doing calls for them with paramedics. Salix has a paramedic. We're still doing calls with them because he works 24 on at the fire department and he's got 48 off. So there's, we tried to figure out, is there a time of the day when we could just go with an EMT and not a paramedic? And yeah, we can do it, but those critical calls are scattered all over the board. And rather than ask for the full quarter-time position, we thought we'd work this in increments as we need it and keep our schedule at a minimum. That's why we came in at the 150 hours.
Because that's not really a whole lot. You're adding like 1 day a month and 2 every other month.
We're adding about 7 days, just under 7 days of coverage at 150 hours, 7 24-hour shifts. And that's where we feel we need to go, as, like you said, as they earn more vacation time, then we will be back probably asking to take that another step rather than going full quarter-time positions all at once. It's just that I feel like I need to bring to the board the fact that, we agreed we wanted to have 95% coverage on paramedic calls, and we have been able to achieve that. We're right around 95, 96% on patients that need a paramedic. We're delivering paramedic care to them. And there's times when we even double back the paramedics with a patient in Sioux City, the volunteer ambulance, we get another call that paramedics needed, and the local ambulance that they're with actually takes them to the next call. So we've got great cooperation from the services out there to get the staff and these people where they need to be when they need to be there. We even use deputy sheriffs. If we need to get them somewhere, and we've got another, we'll call the sheriff's department and ask for a deputy to come pick them up, get them from one point to the other if they're already out on a call. And we look at every call. We make sure that we're not sending paramedics in just to send paramedics in. You know, we look at every one of them is reviewed.
I'm more likely to support this probably than the CIP projects or requests, but 150 hours doesn't seem like a big ask as far as time coverage, but that's about the gap you feel you have there. Okay.
So this request is for 5,020.06.
The numbers down below just equal what those line items will show up in that paramedic budget for all of the people together, for FICA and IPERS.
Is it countywide or what's this one?
On this, we actually split between rural basic and countywide, so it'd be, if the whole proposal's adopted, it'd be 2510 to general basic, 2510 to rural basic increase. We transfer all the funds over to the paramedic side. They are not a levy authority, so we levy the money where it should be, move it over.
And we're making $200 a call most of the time on these paramedic calls. We're billing the services $200, and most of the time they just pay us whether they get reimbursed or not.
Are there any HR considerations on quarter time, the amount of this increase, classification, payroll? Doesn't really affect,
No, there's
okay,
no benefits.
okay.
Crazy that almost 20% of it's FICA.
We got the numbers for the FICA and IPERS increases from the Pat's office, from Michelle.
Okay.
He didn't just make them up, is what you're saying.
Well, they could have, I didn't. And I doubt that.
Thoughts? Anyone else?
I'm big on the public safety idea, and I think the better coverage we get, and to me, this is a pretty easy way to step up a little additional at a cost that isn't extravagant.
If we don't need them all, we don't use them. And we don't spend payroll dollars elsewhere in the budget, so.
I'll move to approve the request.
Second.
Second by Potabom. Roll call.
DeWitt,
Nay.
Potabom,
Aye.
Radig,
Aye.
Ung.
Aye. Passes 3-1, DeWitt opposed. Thank you. Moving on to C, 2021 CIP program.
Hey, did they send out any, did they send these out?
Those were in our
Yes.
packets.
Okay, very good, that's where we're at. Next week, on the 20th, we can't do anything this week, but on the 20th, we'll come back next week and maybe relook our current CIP. I had to plug a number in, and the board had to decide how high did they want to go on CIP for the current year, which is levied next year. We can talk about that next week. But CIP, it's always a moving target. We do have all CIP requests here that Kenny did receive. We go through them each one at a time. That's so desired. Actually, the money we're budgeting here is just receiving a budget. We can plug them in, but the revenue generated for these requests aren't generated till the following fiscal year. So we borrow the money always in May. So these items here would affect our 21-22 budget. This current year, we did receive them all, and then you're approving on a one-on-one basis.
Yeah. These don't affect the current askings, they're
No,
just the
they do
plan.
not. But should give you an idea what's being requested out there, because there was a policy passed to limit somewhat 400,000 per year, and that's just a policy. But the first one here is, if you want to go through each one of these, there's not a whole lot of them.
Yeah.
Okay, the first one's Security Institute, and Becca's here to explain that. They're doing some remodeling or redesign out there, and each of these has to pay something. Our share would be $123,066.
I wouldn't call it remodeling at this point. But January 29th, the Security Institute Commission met and discussed, there's been some ongoing issues with settling at the TSI, so that, and there's a 28E agreement in place between Western Iowa Tech, the county, and then the city as well. So they all have representation at those meetings, along with a couple citizens at large. I printed off a couple, I don't know, Rocky, if you still have yours, but to actually, okay, if you'd like to see further information, we have some of the estimates from the college. They actually own the building, so as emergency management and the comm center, we are tenants. And we, as part of that 28E agreement, pay a third of the operating costs annually, as well as any repairs or maintenance. A few years back, they decided to, instead of billing on actual expenses, they decided to start putting it away to a slush fund, kind of like the reserves, what the Emergency Management Commission has, in preparation for any large maintenance that would be needed. At this point, the eastern portion of the facility is causing major damage to the eastern half of the structure. So it goes anywhere from replacing flooring, putting pilings in, raising some of the floors on the lower level, as well as removing some of the concrete walls on the main floor of the building and replacing it with drywall to get rid of some of that weight that's on that top level. So going through the estimates that was prepared by the college, they have the different projects more or less. Right now it's all estimated. It has not been sent out for bid. So that's why you see that 10% of cost, as well as the engineering cost, for a total expenses of the $412,425. The current fund balance in the reserves there is just over $43,000. So that's where that transition came into each agency paying their third. So what's left over is just shy of the $370,000, leaving everybody's third just over $123,000.
How old's the building?
It just turned 11 years old in December.
And that was as a joint project bid out and built, right? It was, or was WIT responsible for doing it all?
I'm not entirely sure how the creation, because I know a lot of it came from state grants. I guess Gary could probably speak more to that too, but it was the agreement that once the facility was built, the college is the owner, but we pay rent, so they incur 1/3 of the cost.
So, I mean, we should have had like geotesting done, ground testing done, and an engineer design and everything at 11 years ago. I mean, that was a standard procedure.
Those cars that we filled out.
From what the maintenance director said after our meeting, that engineering company, for one, is no longer in business any longer. And a lot of it, some of the other engineers coming in, you have to deal with the loss of soil, what's underneath below what they tested. So, and we're kind of at their mercy again,
Sure.
being tenants, so what.
I just didn't know if there's somebody we could go back on as far as, design damages, because, this should be something that lasts more than 11 years by all, and I'm not,
It sounds like that was looked into, but with the engineers out of business, no longer around.
okay.
It's pretty hard to go back. The soil tests and everything were done before the building was built. facility was built with Iowa infrastructure funds and then transferred ownership to the college. And at that point, back in 2006, I believe it was, they joined the security institute. Back then it was called the Regional Institute for Preparedness. The city, the county, and the college signed a intergovernmental agreement that they would share those costs by a third, are operating in any CIP capital issues with the building. The same project was turned over to the city. They're taking it out of city CIP funds for their portion, starting in July. Something definitely needs to be done with the facility. They're going to put in 60-some 120-foot piers on the eastern side, down and then attach them to the foundation to keep it from continuing to fall. But it's definitely something's not done with the facility. It's going to be a worse issue than we got today.
Are the piers going into something, or is that where they hit rock, or?
They're trying to get down to bedrock with the piers. And but it was built on low sill soil. And the compaction was all done back then. Something to do with the water movement around the building has done some of it. They definitely think the foundation's slipping away from the building toward the east. That's what's causing it to drop. When we installed our new communications furniture this last summer, we had to put 2x4s on the one end of the furniture just to get to level it out. So it's like a 3-inch drop in the console from the center to the southeast corner. So they've already done sheetrock work in the last 2-3 years. They've removed the door between the comm center and the interop lab because they couldn't realign it.
They had a drainage pipe break this summer because of the shift.
So the cost to repair interior after structural stabilization, it doesn't show in there necessarily the either mud jacking or foam jacking or however. Is it part of, okay, I was just making sure it was in there.
If you actually want to see what they put together for
Okay,
what's in there, I didn't
it didn't,
originally-
it wasn't on this that I
No.
saw, so that's,
So if you want this, you guys can have a copy of it, or?
that answers the question.
Yeah, so the project's going to include removing some block wall down next to the comm center in that area that's settling, and then remove that block wall up above to get rid of some of the load. Once they move those areas and they get the pillars in, pilings in, at that point, then they're going to mud jack the floors to bring them back up to level in the hallway and the entranceway or the back entrance. And then they've got to go in and re-level the comm center floor.
That's hoping that cement wall is not a load-bearing wall, right?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Yeah, sheet rock right
Just
above.
just up above
Yeah.
this, okay.
And then the square footage of the building,
I'm not really sure what the actual square footage is.
We have a lot.
67,000.
oh, okay.
For some reason, it's right on like the eastern part of Becca's area that you'll see in the comm center area is where the worst part is. The total worst part is in the far east side.
But again, these are all just estimates too.
Correct.
The engineer that's putting together the estimates have been dealing with the issues for this last, summer, or started about a year ago.
And the TSI commission does have an engineer, I guess, on the payroll through the college that have been out doing surveys. And again, that goes back to being tenants. We're not privy to a lot of it because WIT owns the building. It's what they choose to do in a sense.
From attending the meeting and seeing what we have and seeing some cracks and settling, I don't think that was
I did reach out to the president of WIT, and we have the option because I did send this out to the Emergency Management Commission, or Executive Committee, you know, to let them know as well, because it is two different commissions. We do have some that sit on both. But the question was asked too about spreading this out over a period of time. The college is willing to work up to a 4-year period. I hesitate on that a little bit, just for the fact of, if it continues to be a problem, in 3 to 4 years, are we looking at another large project?
Well, shoring up the building should be done right away.
They're looking
But
at,
the
yeah, this summer.
interior remodel part can maybe be
Right when
delayed.
school gets out, they won't
Correct.
start.
And I guess, again, I'm not an engineer, but I think like a helical would be better than a push pier in our sandy soil, but, I guess I don't know if they could,
You're being serious, right?
I don't know, I just throwing it out there. It might be cheaper and more effective for doing what we want to do, but I don't know.
Well, we have a year to work it out.
They're gonna build, July 1st.
Oh, okay.
Who's the engineer that gave us the,
Global. Do you want a copy of this?
sure, I'll take it.
If they're gonna start July 1st, this is one they probably can't receive, we're gonna have to approve it. Because if we don't do it, I don't know what they do with the project.
Honestly, if we can't approve it as a CIP through the county, it's gonna fall back on the Emergency Management Commission. We were just here last week, and I think it was about 133,000 total for the emergency management budget for FY '21.
So would this be a 2020 CIP then?
21.
21.
Starts this July 1st, coming up, 21. For
Okay.
20, which would. go back
But you
to our-
pitched these items as taxable next year. And that's not the case for this one, so,
This one or possibly the next one too. For the sheriff and the police department on this software stuff. This one, if they're gonna start July 1st, I think,
They're going to bill us July 1st.
okay.
That's what Sioux City's, they're
Which will
putting,
go
they're
against
gonna
our
pay theirs
21
July
CIP.
1. College will bill the city separately.
Can we just have them bill them for us too, or?
Yeah, no. Because typically the operating budget is included in the emergency management budget.
So Dennis, are all of these items within this item C going to be payable this fiscal year or not?
not these items here. These will be 2021 fiscal year. These are CIPs for fiscal year 20.
Right, by this year, I mean this fiscal year, this budgeting process.
The current, you mean our budgeting process for next year or our current budget
The budget we're approving,
for next year?
yes,
This will all be in next year's budget, yes,
okay.
which we'd levy for the following year.
Okay. And that's the case for all of these, so we're not
Yes.
needing to move to approve separately if we agree with everything.
Yeah, if you agree with everything, yes, you could approve it all, and that'd be our CIP for next year.
Okay. Can we move on to the next one?
Okay, the next one is an estimate from the sheriff's office, and they've talked to the police department, and this is a rough estimate, but the estimated cost to replace their records management software, which has been recommended by some individual evidently, that our share will be $500,000, the city share will be $500,000. And he did get an explanation there, comments at the bottom there, goes on the second page. And evidently, there is a need for an update. It's an expensive update. So it's just, this really is just information. This is what they'd like to have plugged in. This would probably be the high amount, but they aren't even sure of that. The first one, they know what that's gonna cost. Depends on the bids coming in, like Marty said. This one here is an estimate, and that's half our share.
Are we preempting the other party? It says conversations have centered around a 50/50 cost.
50/50 is the city of Sioux City.
I know, but have they approved that?
I do not know that.
What
I
if they
doubt
approve
they
a
have.
45,
It's gonna be
55
their
cost?
CIP program. I don't
Okay.
know, they don't approve their CIP for another 2-3 weeks. But we just want to get everybody's ideas of what they had, that they were kind of having a, I don't want to say a wish list, but a list they'd like to have.
Do we know if they're clear on the dollar amount? And because we're approving a dollar amount, are they clear on that?
It's totally an estimated cost. They do not have a set number according to Todd Wick.
well, we do. We estimated
Yeah, we
one,
got an
so.
estimate of $500,000, that's the number they gave us, Todd. Which the police department evidently submitted the same thing to City Sioux City.
There you go. That's my question.
There we go. Now, there we go now. Yes.
Any questions on this?
Like I say, this could all change throughout the year of the next fiscal year. That's why these are kind of moving targets, but it gives you a good idea what people would like to have. Okay, you want to go to the next one? Next one is building service turned in, evidently our courthouse HVAC chiller overhaul. Needs the work done on it, and that's $250,000. You want to go through all of these?
Are these all over 5 years then?
No, this is per year. This is just for the fiscal year next year. Now, some, when you get to Gary's, he has a program 5 years down the road, but these are all next year requests.
So $500,000 for the last item up front, year one.
Yes, that's 1 year.
But I mean, my question is the payment schedule would be structured in 5 years?
Nope, it'd be, when we repay it on a bond issue, yes, it'd be 5 years.
There you go.
But the
That's my
cost would
question.
be right.
That's
up
my
front.
question. Thank
You
you.
put them all together and borrow
Right.
next year, then have
Yes.
5
If we
years
come
to
up with
pay
$1
it.
million,
Yeah. So there's no items that are beyond 5 years that we
on
would,
these requests for the next year? No.
right, okay.
They're all for next year, which we'll pay over. We have done 10 years, but it's better to go 5 and we get rid of it.
Okay. Questions on the chiller? Next
The
is,
next three are district health. With our agreement with them, they come up with projects they'd like to have done because it is our building. And they actually have 3 different projects. The first one is painting the generator housing unit. Now, Kenny could address these more specifically, but he's not here today. They're out doing things with our architect. There's $7,000 there for painting the generator housing. The next one is $5,000 to redo the sidewalk in front of the Southern District Health. And the last one is carpeting the interior for $16,000. I believe they did request the $16,000 this current year. We didn't do it because we didn't really want to borrow money. The sidewalk's new. I think the generator's new too. For
New
next-
requests, you mean?
Yeah, new request.
yeah. Sidewalk itself is cracked. Yeah.
No, just the carpeting is a repeat. The other 2 are new.
So I'd like to see those before voting.
Well, last year what we did, we voted to approve, or to receive them all, then we approve them as they come up during the fiscal year. In this case, the first one we had, that's something we're gonna have to approve. The others you can approve during the next fiscal year,
Or not?
or not. Yeah, you may not even wanna do them. But it gives the board the opportunity just to plug in a number to the budget, because we don't levy the money till 21. That's why this is kind of moving target, because there's a lot of times we've come up with new expenses during the year that are qualified CIP that the board approves. So by the time we get to May, all 20s will be, really about April, 20s will be done. So in this case, you got a year, you got 6 months or so to think about all these. With the exception of the first one, if they're gonna do the payment request at July 1st.
Well, I tend to agree with holding back on the Siouxland District Health approvals for the cosmetic items.
Right. Then you approve them on a one-on-one basis when they come back and say, you know, we'd like to have the project approved. It's fine, because we don't get the money until the following year.
So other than the first one, we could just receive them all and then either approve them or disapprove them when they come up?
Correct. Because we actually don't levy taxes to pay back over 5 years till the next fiscal year, 21, 22. These are projects they want to do during 2021.
But in our history, if you receive them, it signals to them that it was approved.
Until this current year, because we told them, and I've told everybody, the department heads, that it is not approved till the board specifically approves each project. That's why we keep coming back with projects for the current year, because the board did receive them. Because the board realized these are moving targets. We've had several come up, like with Pat, on elections that he needed that really weren't in the CIP when we did the budgeting. fluctuates, and the board has the ability to fluctuate it because we don't borrow till May of '21.
All right, well, I will move to approve the first item,
Second.
second by Potabom.
By first item, you mean?
Security Institute.
The
Security
123,000
Institute.
Security Institute.
Discussion on that item. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 4-0. And I'll move to receive the remaining items.
Second.
Second by Potabom. Hearing no discussion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Passes 4-0. Thank you. Item D, Board of Supervisors. Dennis, what is this?
I think you skipped one on there.
Did?
Yeah.
D
Gary's.
is out. There's nothing there on D. Oh, I know why D there is because it's based on the wage plan. The board has to decide, or could decide on the wage plan.
Gary's CIP stuff.
Where?
In the CIP.
Oh. Do you want to go over that, Dennis, the other CIP items for information?
Okay. The other CIP, we went through district health. The next one would be emergency services. He does have a 5-year plan, but for 2021 fiscal year, he has $25,000 for purchase of new turnout gear and $53,000 for replacement of unit number 204, 1-ton rescue truck. And then he has the next 1, 2, 3, 4 years planned out through basic monitors, trucks, whatever. And Gary is here if you want to speak with him on these. But again, we'd be receiving these, like you did vote to receive them all. We're just telling you what they would like to have.
Sure.
Okay, if there's nothing more on that one, unless you want to discuss with Gary, we can go on to the next one. This one here is a 6th floor lobby. They're requesting $20,000 for security doors at the front of the entrance to the 6th floor. They've asked for this last year, it was not approved. They're asking again. So the board has to determine, is there a need for that up in that area or not? And the last one is, this is a question mark, the Little Sioux Park asphalt resurfacing. He did have it this year for $450,000. He realized he probably wouldn't get it. So he's asking for now $600,000, but he did not put which year, it could be approved. And he said it could be done by county bonds. So the question here, he stood before you before, was Conservation Reserve does projects. Maybe this could be one where they have to allocate so much money a year from Conservation Reserve. The county go ahead and borrow the money like we did with the Nature Center. We did borrow money for the road going there, and they paid us back in 10 years. Actually, they paid principal and interest over 10 years out of their reserve. That theory could work out the same way with that $600,000. Would that be a decision of the board? Would they be willing to bond for it and then have conservation pay the principal and interest every year instead of taxation? And that's the gist of all of them. Any questions on any of them?
No?
Personally, I wouldn't mind taking the security doors out for the 6th floor and maybe pushing the vehicles back all 1 year under Gary's deal. Get the new turnout gear in 2021 and push the vehicles back. No, get the turnout gear right away, push back the vehicle.
You guys want to do it, it's, I can speak to turnout here for a minute while Melissa's here. This is follow-on from the visit we had from the
Am I on?
new work comp carrier,
Hear me?
WCA.
Okay.
Where they did I would call it an audit on, yeah. So they basically did an audit with our department to check and see where we were safety-wise and safety equipment-wise with policies and procedures, physicals. To make a long story short, we've got everything done that they requested except for the turnout gear. And they've agreed, because of the $25,000 expense in the middle of a budget year, to allow us to carry that through the budget process and get it approved for next year. But everything else is done. We were able to bring the physicals in at about $160 a person using a company, a mobile company that's approved by the work comp carrier. We cleaned up our policies and procedures. We made some changes in the way we do business. And as far as I know,
number of times you go out for the fires, and that monthly
just the turnout gear that we have, the NFPA is a recommendation, but it's a standard most insurance companies go by. It's not a mandate, but our gear falls well outside of the NFPA.
And that's why I wasn't asking to
Yeah.
move that out. I had known that from our discussions.
And then the vehicle, it's just a matter of, we're trying to keep up with not running our maintenance costs up by having vehicles. This one's got 120,000 on it roughly right now. By the time, if it were approved in next year's budget, by the time we did the purchase, we're probably gonna be at 170 to 180, maybe even 200,000 on that vehicle. And, at that point, those 1 tons with the diesels, the automatic transmissions, they just start costing you more money than
What kind of vehicle is it?
just a 1 ton dually pickup.
Brand or
Huh?
brand?
Whatever's low bid. We've got a Chevy, we've got a Dodge. We usually, as long as they meet the specs, we go with the low bid. We went away from the utility body trucks. We reconfigured the back of a 1 ton pickup with a slide out tray and a topper. The 53,000 would be buying the truck and re-outfitting it again. And then we would have the used truck to put up for sale, or if another county department has a use for something with high miles but still in decent condition, body-wise. Just an FYI, the Freightliner we bought, it's online, it's working great. Our first big event with it is going to be fire school coming up in March to really give it a workout. And then once we get that done, we'll be looking at trying to figure out how to sell our old unit, either to sell it as one or to piece it out, sell it in parts to generate the compressor, the cascade system, the fill station. We're going to kind of put the word out at fire school that we're looking at maybe taking sealed bids eventually on it. It's not one that I would put on dub.com. It's more one that we would most likely either take sealed bids ourselves, or we would go through a fire trader company like where we bought the truck from. Any question?
So, Mr. Ratty, were you suggesting moving the truck from year 1 to year 2?
Yeah, that's what I was making a suggestion for. And then also on the security doors for 6th floor, moving that or moving that out.
It's just the way, just so you know, the longer we keep them, the more they cost to operate.
Yeah.
You blow an engine in one of them diesels, you're talking probably $12,000, $15,000 more than the value of what
Well,
this truck is.
I mean, if that happened and you were out, 12,000 to repair, I think we'd look at, instead of repairing it,
Right,
again,
I'm just trying to make sure the board understands my thought process.
Sure, and you're doing your job. I'm not saying you're not. It's just, we're tasked with something.
Because we got into that situation with our old air truck. I mean, it literally caught on fire on the way to a call one night. We just got too far behind on that truck, so. And we deal with emergency calls. I don't want to be broke down, so.
I totally understand that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. On the moving of the truck to year 2, is there unanimous consent to have that reflected in our motion? I believe so.
Fine.
There is. Is there the same unanimous consent on the security doors on the 6th floor?
We have courthouse security here. We have, that'd be 6 floors of elevator to go up to. I just think that it's already secure.
Rocky?
Yeah, I'm not in favor of those doors up on 6th.
That's fine with me.
We have unanimous consent to understand that to be in our motion as well.
Eliminate the doors and move the truck forward.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Now we are on item D. Is this an item, Dennis, or a heading, Board of Supervisors?
This used to be the landfill, we just didn't get it out of the agenda there. So we're really out to item E.
So there's no action on item D.
Correct.
Item E is wage plan employees, all funds. We need to decide on a percentage to increase the wage plan employees this next fiscal year. I spent all day Friday with Melissa and our attorneys bargaining with 3 union groups. It went very well. We can anticipate 3 tentative agreements, 3 multi-year tentative agreements for the board next Tuesday. Next Tuesday, if they're ratified. I think you'll find my personal recommendation in line with those numbers, and so I'd move a 2.75% increase.
Second.
Second by DeWitt. Any discussion?
And that's fair with all the other raises that have been,
Yes.
okay.
Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Thank you. Regarding the next budget review discussion, barring a closed session or two, I'd anticipate 3 or 3:30.
Three would be fine, 3:30.
Okay.
I hate to keep you here long, like now, we got still a little time, but we don't, you don't know when you're going
3:30
through
would
this
work
whole
better for me.
discussion.
Okay. We'll shoot for 3:30.
Okay. We'll have final numbers and.
Yeah. We'll work on some moves to get comfortably under the existing levy by next week. And at that time, or next week, the following, we can consider perhaps the improvement request.
We can pretty much wrap it up next week.
And the deadline to publish is,
Is toward the end of February. Wouldn't hurt to be done next week, and then the 18th is an open day.
18th is no.
So we get it published. Our first publication will just be the tax limitation funds. We have to do that before we do our 31st.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the cause? And we will recess until 4:15 closed session in the first floor boardroom.